system.
It's an electronic device for storing and processing data.
The nervous system is all the collection of nerves in your body.
Yeast is a eukaryote.
Welcome to Spectacular Science, where it's all about science, with your host, Akshay.
Hey listeners, welcome back to this episode of Spectacular Science. I'm your host, Akshay. Have you ever wondered how living things grow? And what happens to their cells when they're growing? Well, I've also wondered about that too, especially when I see my plant and even I'm growing. So what goes on inside of that helps it grow? Well, the process of cell division, or making more cells, which are tiny building blocks of our bodies and of all living things, is called mitosis, which basically is cells cloning themselves and making more of them. It's a very complex process, but how does it work? And what's the science behind that? Well, in this episode, I'm taking you inside the human body to discover how mitosis, or cell division, works and why it's so important for living things. Okay, time to get ready to go inside the body. First of all, let's introduce you to the cell. Cells are the building blocks of all life on Earth. Cells are made up of tinier pieces called organelles, which perform the functions that the cell needs to survive. Cells are really important, and there are different types of cells like hair cells, skin cells, lung cells, and even liver cells. There's cells all over your body, but they do have a few organelles in common that help them grow and divide. The organelle, called the nucleus, is basically the control center of the entire cell and contains the DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, of the cell. The DNA tells the cell what to do, and that is very important because it has to copy that in order to divide and make a new cell. There's also other organelles, such as the cytoplasm, which is where all the organelles flow in, and the cell membrane, which is the surrounding piece of a cell that play a role in mitosis. So first of all, let's take a deeper dive into how these cells grow and reproduce. First of all, let's talk about the stages of mitosis. There is this stage called the interphase, and this interphase is just the normal life of a cell. The cell gets energy and performs functions that are needed for the organism's survival. This is true in humans, animals, plants, and even smaller organisms like bacteria and amoebas. In multicellular organisms, or organisms that have one or more cells, all the cells work together in order to keep the organism alive. Now, in mitosis, after interphase, the interphase stage is basically the growing and developing of the cell. During that time, the cell copies or replicates its DNA, which is basically the genetic code, which is information that the cell needs in order to survive. After it has copied that during interphase, it passes through a few checkpoints. These checkpoints are enforced by proteins. These special proteins check whether the cell is ready to move on to the next phase or not. They are positive and negative proteins. The positive proteins encourage cell growth and tell them, yeah, you got this, time to move on to the next stage. And the negative cells say, well, something's wrong here, you should probably go fix it. Now, if they receive the green light, or the positive proteins, now they can move on to the second phase, which is prophase. During prophase, chromosomes, which are small sections of the DNA in the nucleus, condense. That means that they basically get bigger and they're more exposed to the entire cell. And a pair of centrioles, which are special organelles, move to the opposite sides of the nucleus. Special fibers begin to form a bridge between the ends of the cell. This is basically ordering the chromosomes, or the tiny parts of the DNA, in the nucleus. Next comes the metaphase. During metaphase, the the chromosomes are pulled together. It's kind of like a tug-of-war game, and they're attached to each of the chromosomes. And those fibers actually help line up those chromosomes in the center line inside the nucleus. Next is the anaphase. This is when the chromosomes actually split, and they make two sets of chromosomes. These two sets of chromosomes will become two new cells, and that's how mitosis happens. And then there's the telophase, which basically means that the chromosomes are now identical, and the spindle fibers which hold the chromosomes together disappear. And a nuclear membrane, which is basically a cell membrane, forms around each set of chromosomes. Also, the nucleus of each cell also appears, and all the cytoplasm and other organelles start to form inside of the second cell. Next is the last stage of mitosis, cytokinesis. It's very important of cell division, and it's really not considered a stage of mitosis, but it is still part of that cycle, the cell cycle as we call it. During cytokinesis, the cell physically splits. This occurs just after the anaphase and a little bit after the telophase. Basically, the cell membrane splits, and that causes two cells to form. And this is the physical splitting of those cells. Now, we have two cells right now, and as more cells multiply, it becomes more and more and more and more cells. And that's what forms a complex living organism like us humans. Mitosis plays a very large role in the growing and developing of organisms like us or even plants. You see when the plant grows, there's all these mitosis stuff all happens inside of one cell and starts and creates a chain reaction that causes mitosis in other cells and other cells. And when you start off with only having one cell, that turns into two cells, and then on and on and on and on until you get 100 trillion cells. And that's only a little bit of what's in our human body. It's so amazing that our human bodies are made of these tiny, tiny little cells, and there's so much going on that actually helps them spread, multiply, and that helps us grow. Wow, it's really cool. I should build a special microscope that helps us examine how these mitosis stuff works, and it helps us see it in real time. We need a way stronger microscope than the one that I have in my lab. I should probably invent that. Before I go, let's recap on what we learned today. We learned that mitosis is the process of cell division, where a cell turns from one cell into two cells. It's cell reproduction. The cells reproduce in a few stages called mitosis. The prophase, where the chromosomes line up, which are small parts of the DNA. Metaphase, which is basically the arranging of these chromosomes. Anaphase is when they split, and telophase is when they arrange again to create two different cells. And outside of that, there's cytokinesis, which is where the cells physically split. When they're not doing this, cells are usually in the inner phase, where they're growing and developing in order to go into mitosis. In this stage, they're able to replicate or duplicate their DNA. They're basically able to create copies of their DNA, which can turn into more cells. It's really cool that there's so much going on this small scale, and it's going on right now in our body. In fact, every 7 years, all the cells in your body have undergone mitosis, and all the cells every 7 years are completely new. Basically, you have a new you every 7 years. It's amazing. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Spectacular Science. Spectacular Science is produced and hosted by me, Akshay J. Raman. Our theme song and additional music are by Charan Ramachandran. Special thanks to Varun Ramachandran. Please visit my podcast website, spectacularsci.com, to find interactive activities, blog posts, and all of our episodes. That's spectacularsci.com. Please subscribe or follow this podcast wherever you're listening right now. That could be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or Amazon Music, or anything else. Please subscribe and follow this show. This really encourages me and helps me keep making new episodes. Thank you so much. Remember to also sign up for the Spectacular Science membership. It's a free membership and you can get bonus episodes, activities, and the fact of the day, a fun science fact every day. Sign up at spectacularsci.com/membership. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we'll see you on the next episode of Spectacular Science. Bye!